Sarah Martinez looked at her watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes. It was 6:30 p.m. on a cold Tuesday evening in November, and she had to be at work by 7 p.m. Her 7-year-old son Tommy was sitting at their small kitchen table, slowly eating his dinner of mac and cheese from a box. The same dinner they had eaten for the past 3 nights because it was all Sarah could afford. "Mommy, when is Mrs. Chun coming?" Tommy asked, looking up from his bowl with his big brown eyes. Those eyes reminded Sarah so much of her ex-husband, David, but she tried not to think about that anymore. Sarah's heart sank. She had been dreading this moment all day. "Sweetie, Mrs. Chun is sick tonight." "She can't watch you," she said softly, sitting down next to her son. Tommy's face fell. At 7 years old, he was smart enough to understand what this meant. "So you can't go to work?" he asked. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had already missed 2 shifts this month because of childcare problems. Her supervisor, Ms. Rodriguez, had been understanding so far, but Sarah knew she was running out of chances. St. Mary's Hospital was a busy place, and they needed nurses who could show up reliably. "I don't know, baby. Let me make some phone calls," Sarah said, trying to sound hopeful. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah called every number in her phone. She called her neighbor down the hall, but Mrs. Peterson was out of town visiting her daughter. She called the teenage girl who sometimes babysat on weekends, but Emma had a big test tomorrow and couldn't help. She even called her ex-husband, David, but his phone went straight to voicemail like it always did. Sarah stared at her phone and felt tears starting to form in her eyes. 8 months ago, David had walked out on them. He said he wasn't ready to be a father and needed to find himself. He took their savings account and moved to another state. Sarah hadn't heard from him since, except for the divorce papers that arrived 2 months later. Since then, Sarah had been struggling to make ends meet. Her salary as a night shift nurse was decent, but it wasn't enough to cover rent, utilities, food, and childcare for Tommy. She had sold her car and bought an older, cheaper one. She had canceled their cable TV and cut back on groceries. But it still wasn't enough. The worst part was finding someone to watch Tommy during her night shifts. Sarah worked from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. Most babysitters didn't want to work overnight, and the ones who did charged more money than Sarah could afford, Mrs. Chun. Their elderly neighbor had been helping for free because she felt sorry for them. But last week, Mrs. Chen had fallen and hurt her hip. Now she could barely take care of herself. "Mommy, are you crying?" Tommy asked, walking over to where Sarah was sitting. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes. "No, sweetie. I just have something in my eye." She hugged her son tight. Tommy was such a good kid. He never complained about their small apartment or their simple meals. He helped with chores and always did his homework without being asked. He deserved so much better than this. Sarah looked at the clock again. 6:45 p.m. She had 15 minutes to get to work, but she couldn't leave Tommy alone. He was too young, and it wasn't safe. But if she didn't go to work, she might lose her job. And if she lost her job, they would lose their apartment. They would have nowhere to go. "Tommy, come sit with me," Sarah said, patting the couch beside her. Tommy climbed up next to his mother. "Are we in trouble, Mommy?" he asked. Sarah looked at her son's innocent face. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that they were barely surviving? That every day was a struggle to keep their heads above water? "We're going through a hard time right now," Sarah said carefully, "but we're going to be okay. We just have to be brave and help each other." Tommy nodded seriously. "I can be brave, Mommy. I'm not scared." Sarah's heart broke a little more. Her son was trying to be strong for her when it should be the other way around. She thought about her options. She could call in sick again, but that would mean losing a day's pay and possibly her job. She could leave Tommy with a neighbor, but she didn't know any of them well enough to trust them with her child. Then Sarah had an idea. It was crazy and probably wrong, but she was out of options. St. Mary's Hospital was a big place with lots of unused rooms. There was a small storage room on the 3rd floor that had been converted into a break area, but nobody used it during night shifts. Maybe, just maybe, she could bring Tommy with her. "Tommy, how would you like to come to work with Mommy tonight?" Sarah asked. Tommy's eyes lit up. Really? Can I see where you work? Well, you would have to be very quiet and very good. You would have to sleep in a special room while Mommy takes care of sick people. It would be like a secret adventure. Tommy nodded eagerly. I can be quiet, Mommy, I promise. Sarah knew it was against hospital rules. She knew she could get in serious trouble if anyone found out, but what choice did she have? She couldn't lose her job, and she couldn't leave Tommy alone. Okay, but this has to be our secret. You can't tell anyone at school or anywhere else, and you have to promise to be very quiet and do exactly what Mommy says. I promise, Tommy said solemnly. Sarah quickly packed a bag with Tommy's pajamas, a blanket, his favorite stuffed animal, and some quiet toys. She also packed some crackers and juice boxes in case he got hungry during the night. As they drove to the hospital, Sarah's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. She kept telling herself that it was just for one night, just until she could figure out something else. But deep down, she knew this might become their new normal. Mommy, I'm excited to see where you work, Tommy said from the back seat. Remember, we have to be very quiet when we get there, Sarah reminded him. I know, it's our secret adventure. Sarah pulled into the hospital parking lot and took a deep breath. She was about to break every rule in the book, but she didn't see any other way. She had to take care of her son, and she had to keep her job. This was the only solution she could think of. Ready for our adventure, Tommy? She asked. Ready, Mommy. Sarah grabbed their bags and took Tommy's hand. Together they walked toward the hospital entrance, not knowing that this decision would change their lives forever. Sarah held Tommy's hand tightly as they walked through the hospital's back entrance. Her heart was beating so fast, she thought everyone could hear it. The hallways were busy with day shift nurses finishing their work and getting ready to go home. Sarah knew most of them, but tonight she tried to avoid eye contact. She didn't want anyone to notice Tommy walking beside her. Stay close to me, Sarah whispered to her son as they took the elevator to the third floor. Tommy squeezed his mother's hand and nodded. He was trying to be brave, but his eyes were wide as he looked around the hospital. Everything was so big and white and clean. There were strange sounds everywhere, beeping machines, people talking, and footsteps echoing down the long halls. Sarah used her keycard to open the door to the old storage room. It was small and dusty, with boxes stacked against one wall and an old table in the corner. There was a small window that looked out at the parking lot, and the room had its own light switch. This is where you'll sleep, sweetie, Sarah said. Trying to sound cheerful, she quickly made a bed on the floor using the blanket she had brought from home. She arranged Tommy's pillow and his stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, on the makeshift bed. The room wasn't perfect, but it was safe and warm. It's like camping, Tommy said, sitting down on the blanket. Exactly like camping, Sarah agreed, feeling a little better. Now remember, you have to be very quiet. If you hear footsteps outside, don't make any noise. I'll come check on you every hour, okay? Tommy nodded seriously. What if I need to go to the bathroom? Sarah had thought about this. There's a bathroom right down the hall. But only go if you really, really need to, and be very quiet. Sarah kissed her son on the forehead and gave him one more hug. I have to go start work now. Be good and try to sleep. I love you, Mommy, Tommy whispered. I love you too, baby. Sarah locked the door behind her and went to start her shift. Her hands were still shaking as she received the report from the day shift nurse. She tried to act normal, but her mind kept thinking about Tommy alone in that little room. The first night was the hardest. Sarah was so nervous that she made small mistakes. She forgot to check one patient's medication schedule and had to go back to double-check everything. During her break, she snuck upstairs to check on Tommy. He was fast asleep. Curled up with Mr. Peanuts, Sarah stood there for a moment watching her son sleep and felt both guilty and grateful at the same time. By the second week, they had developed a routine. Sarah would arrive at work 30 minutes early when the hospital was still busy with people coming and going. She would take Tommy to the storage room and get him settled with his coloring books, small toys, and a juice box. Tommy had learned to whisper and move very quietly. Mommy, look what I drew, Tommy said softly one night, showing her a picture of stick figures. "That's you helping sick people get better." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful, sweetie." Tommy was becoming an expert at their secret life. He knew which hallways were the quietest and which times of night were safest to go to the bathroom. He had learned to recognize the sound of different people's footsteps in the hallway. The security guard's heavy boots, the cleaning lady's squeaky shoes, and his mother's soft nursing shoes. During the third week, something unexpected happened. Tommy got a small fever one night. Sarah was worried sick as she took his temperature with a thermometer she had brought from home. She gave him some children's medicine and put a cool washcloth on his forehead. "I'm okay, Mommy," Tommy whispered, even though he was clearly not feeling well. "Don't worry about me." That night was terrible for Sarah. She had to take care of her patients, but all she could think about was Tommy lying sick in that storage room. She checked on him every 30 minutes instead of every hour. By morning, his fever had gone down. But Sarah realized how dangerous their situation really was. The other nurses on the night shift started to notice small changes in Sarah's behavior. Maria, who had worked with Sarah for 5 years, saw that Sarah seemed more stressed than usual. "Are you okay?" Maria asked one night during their break. "You seem worried about something." "I'm fine," Sarah said quickly. "Just tired." But Maria wasn't convinced. She noticed that Sarah disappeared for a few minutes every hour during their shift. She also noticed that Sarah was eating more snacks than usual and sometimes brought an extra coffee cup to work. "Maybe she's dating someone," whispered Janet, another nurse. "Maybe she's meeting someone during her breaks." The nurses began to pay more attention to Sarah's behavior. They didn't mean to be nosy, but they cared about her and wanted to make sure she was okay. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, and it made her even more nervous. One night, Tommy asked his mother a question that broke her heart. "Mommy, why can't I tell my friends at school about our secret adventure?" Sarah knelt down beside him. "Because some people wouldn't understand that we're just trying to take care of each other. Are we doing something bad?" Tommy asked. Sarah thought carefully about her answer. "We're doing what we have to do to stay together. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices." Tommy seemed to accept this explanation. He was such a smart, understanding child. He never complained about sleeping on the floor or eating crackers for dinner. He never asked why they couldn't just stay home like other families. During the day, while Sarah slept, Tommy went to school and acted like everything was normal. He didn't tell his friends about spending nights at the hospital. He didn't tell his teacher that his mother was breaking rules to keep her job. He kept their secret perfectly. But keeping secrets is hard work, especially for a 7-year-old. Tommy started having trouble sleeping during the day when they were at home. He would wake up from nightmares about getting caught at the hospital. Sarah noticed that her son was getting thinner and more tired. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Sarah asked one morning after a particularly difficult night. "I'm fine, Mommy. I'm being brave like you said." Sarah hugged her son tight. She knew this couldn't go on forever, but she didn't know what else to do. Every day she hoped for a solution. Maybe Mrs. Chun would get better. Maybe she would find affordable childcare. Maybe David would come back and help them, but none of those things happened. Instead, their secret life continued night after night. Tommy became like a little ghost in the hospital, invisible and silent. Sarah became an expert at sneaking around and making excuses for her strange behavior. Neither of them knew that their carefully planned secret was about to be discovered in the worst possible way. It was a Friday night in November, and St. Mary's Hospital was busier than usual. 3 nurses had called in sick with the flu, and Sarah was assigned to take care of more patients than normal. She was running from room to room, checking on people, giving medicine, and trying to keep everyone comfortable. Sarah looked at her watch. It was almost 10 p.m., time for her hourly check on Tommy, but Mrs. Johnson in room 304 was having trouble breathing, and Mr. Garcia needed help getting to the bathroom. Sarah couldn't leave her patients, but she was worried about Tommy being alone. For so long, finally, at 10:30 p.m., Sarah managed to get away. She hurried up to the 3rd floor, her nursing shoes squeaking softly on the clean hospital floors. She was so tired and stressed that she forgot to do something very important. She forgot to lock the storage room door when she went inside to check on Tommy. Tommy was awake, sitting on his blanket and looking scared. "Mommy, where were you?" "You're late," he whispered. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I had to help some very sick people. Are you okay?" I heard loud footsteps outside. "I was scared," Tommy said, hugging Mr. Peanuts tightly. Sarah felt terrible. Her son was frightened, and it was her fault. "I'm here now. Try to go to sleep, okay? I'll be back soon." She kissed Tommy's forehead and rushed back to her patients. But in her hurry, Sarah made a mistake that would change everything. She didn't push the storage room door all the way closed. It was open just a tiny crack, but that tiny crack was enough. Dr. Williams was having a terrible night, too. He was the chief of pediatrics and usually went home by 6 p.m., but tonight, a very sick child had been brought to the emergency room, and Dr. Williams had stayed late to make sure the little girl was okay. It was almost 11 p.m. when Dr. Williams finally finished his work. He was walking down the third-floor hallway toward the elevator when he heard something strange. It sounded like crying, soft, quiet crying that seemed to be coming from the old storage room. Dr. Williams stopped walking and listened carefully. There it was again. Definitely the sound of a child crying, but that was impossible. There were no children on this floor at night, and the storage room had been empty for months. Dr. Williams walked slowly to the storage room door. It was open just a little bit, and he could see a small light inside. He pushed the door open wider and couldn't believe what he saw. There was a little boy sitting on a blanket on the floor. The boy had dark hair and big brown eyes that were full of tears. He was holding a stuffed elephant and looking up at Dr. Williams with fear and confusion. "Hello there," Dr. Williams said gently, trying not to scare the child more. "What's your name?" Tommy was terrified. This was the grown-up in the white coat that his mother had told him to hide from. He didn't know what to say or what to do. I'm Tommy," he whispered. "I'm waiting for my mommy." "Your mommy? Who is your mommy?" Dr. Williams asked, kneeling down to Tommy's level. "She's a nurse. She takes care of sick people," Tommy said quietly. Dr. Williams felt his heart sink. A nurse had been bringing her child to work and hiding him in this storage room. This was against every hospital rule and policy. It was dangerous and completely unacceptable. "What's your mommy's name, Tommy?" Sarah Martinez." Dr. Williams knew Sarah. She was a good nurse who had worked at the hospital for many years. He couldn't understand why she would do something like this. He called security on his cell phone and asked them to find Sarah immediately. 20 minutes later, Sarah was standing in the storage room with Dr. Williams, 2 security guards, and Ms. Rodriguez, the night shift supervisor. Sarah's face was white with fear and embarrassment. Tommy was still sitting on his blanket, now crying quietly because he could tell he had gotten his mother in trouble. "Sarah, I can't believe this," Ms. Rodriguez said, shaking her head. "How long has this been going on?" Sarah's voice was shaking. As she answered, 3 weeks, I'm sorry. I know it was wrong, but I didn't have any other choice." "Any other choice?" Dr. Williams asked. "You could have called in sick. You could have found a babysitter. You could have asked for help." "I tried everything," Sarah said, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. "I called everyone I knew. I can't afford a babysitter for night shifts. My ex-husband left us with nothing. Mrs. Chan, who used to help me, is sick. I already missed 2 shifts this month because of childcare problems. I was afraid I would lose my job." Tommy stood up and walked over to his mother. He wrapped his small arms around her waist. "Don't be mad at my mommy," he said to the adults. "She takes good care of me. I'm not scared when I'm here." Dr. Williams felt sorry for both of them, but he also felt angry. "Sarah, this is incredibly dangerous. What if there had been a fire? What if Tommy had gotten hurt? What if he had wandered into a patient's room? This hospital has rules for good reasons." One of the security guards spoke up. "We need to call child services. A child can't be left alone in a hospital overnight." "No," Sarah said quickly. "Please don't call them. Tommy is fine. I check on him every hour. He's safe." Miss Rodriguez looked sad but firm. Sarah, you know what the hospital policy is. Bringing unauthorized people into the hospital, especially after hours, is grounds for immediate termination. I don't have a choice. Sarah felt like the world was falling apart around her. Please, she begged. I need this job. We'll have nowhere to go. I promise I'll find other childcare. Just give me one more chance. Dr. Williams shook his head. I'm sorry, Sarah. The liability issues alone make this impossible. Insurance won't cover anything if someone gets hurt. You've put the hospital at risk, and you've put your son at risk. Tommy didn't understand all the big words the adults were using, but he understood that his mother was in trouble because of him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I tried to be quiet. I tried to be good. Sarah knelt down and hugged her son. This isn't your fault, baby. You were perfect. You were so brave and so good. Miss Rodriguez pulled out some papers from her folder. Sarah, I have to ask you to clean out your locker and leave the hospital immediately. Your employment is terminated as of right now. Sarah's hands were shaking as she signed the termination papers. 8 years of good work, 8 years of taking care of patients and never having any problems. And it was all over because of 3 weeks of desperation. The security guards escorted Sarah and Tommy out of the hospital. As they walked through the parking lot to their car, Tommy looked up at his mother. Mommy, are we in big trouble now? Sarah looked down at her son's worried face and tried to smile. We're going to be okay, sweetie. We'll figure something out. But as she drove home that night, Sarah had no idea how they were going to survive. She had no job, no money, and now she had a termination on her record that would make it almost impossible to find another nursing position. Their secret adventure was over, and their real nightmare was just beginning. The drive home from the hospital that night was the longest 20 minutes of Sarah's life. Tommy had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted from crying and the stress of getting caught. Sarah kept looking in the rearview mirror at her son's peaceful face, wondering how she was going to tell him that everything was about to get much worse when they got home to their small apartment. Sarah tucked Tommy into his real bed and sat in their tiny living room, staring at the termination papers. The words immediate termination and violation of hospital policy kept jumping out at her. She had been a nurse for 10 years, and now her career was over because of 3 weeks of desperation. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, searching for nursing jobs online. But every application asked the same questions. Have you ever been terminated from a job? And reason for leaving your last position. Sarah knew that any hospital would call St. Mary's for a reference, and they would hear about what she had done. The next morning, Tommy woke up and found his mother still sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed job applications. Mommy, why aren't you sleeping? Tommy asked, rubbing his eyes. I'm looking for a new job, sweetie, Sarah said, trying to sound hopeful. Because of what happened last night? Sarah nodded. Yes, baby. But don't worry, I'll find something. But finding something turned out to be much harder than Sarah had hoped. Over the next 2 weeks, she applied for every nursing position in the city. She applied at other hospitals, nursing homes, doctors' offices, and even considered home health care jobs. But every single employer wanted references from her previous job. When potential employers called St. Mary's Hospital, they were told about the circumstances of Sarah's termination. Most places wouldn't even give her an interview after hearing that she had brought her child to work and violated safety policies. I'm sorry, said the hiring manager at City General Hospital. We just can't take the risk of hiring someone who has shown such poor judgment. The unemployment office told Sarah she could apply for benefits, but because she had been terminated for violating company policy, she would only receive a small amount of money each week. It wasn't nearly enough to cover their rent and bills. Sarah's savings account had only $347 left in it. She had been living paycheck to paycheck even when she was working, and now there were no paychecks coming in. She started selling things to make money, her jewelry, some furniture, anything she could live without. 1 month after losing her job, Sarah had to make a decision she never thought she would face. She couldn't pay their rent, Mrs. Patterson. Their landlord had been patient for 2 weeks, but now she needed the money. I'm sorry, Sarah, Mrs. Patterson said when she came to collect the rent. "I know you're going through a hard time, but I have bills to pay too. If you can't pay by next Friday, you'll have to move out." Sarah looked around their small apartment, the only home Tommy had ever known. "Can I have 2 more weeks?" "I'm sure. I'll find something by then." Mrs. Patterson shook her head sadly. "I've already given you extra time. I have other people who want to rent this place." That afternoon, Sarah found a cheaper apartment in a rougher part of town. It was smaller, darker, and the neighborhood wasn't safe, but it was all she could afford with what little money she had left. Moving day was one of the hardest days of Tommy's young life. He watched his mother pack their belongings into boxes and load them into their old car. He didn't understand why they had to leave their home, but he could see that his mother was very sad and scared. "Where are we going, Mommy?" Tommy asked as they drove through unfamiliar streets. "To our new home," Sarah said, trying to sound excited. "It'll be an adventure." But when they arrived at the new apartment, Tommy's face fell. The building was old and dirty. There were broken windows and trash in the hallways. Their new apartment had only one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that barely fit their old couch. "I don't like it here," Tommy whispered to his mother. "No, sweetie, but it's just temporary. Once Mommy finds a new job, we'll find a better place." Sarah had been looking for any kind of work, not just nursing jobs. She applied to work at grocery stores, restaurants, and cleaning companies. Finally, she got a job cleaning office buildings at night. The pay was terrible, less than half of what she had made as a nurse, but it was something, the cleaning job. It was hard work. Sarah had to scrub floors, empty trash cans, and clean bathrooms in 3 different office buildings every night. She would come home at 6 a.m., exhausted and smelling like cleaning chemicals. Then she had to get Tommy ready for school and try to sleep for a few hours. Before starting all over again, Tommy started to notice big changes in their life. They ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner most nights because it was cheap. His mother was always tired and worried. They couldn't afford to turn the heat up in their apartment, so Tommy wore his jacket inside during the cold winter evenings. At school, Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Davis, noticed that he seemed sad and distracted. His clothes weren't as clean as they used to be, and he had lost weight. One day she asked him to stay after class. "Tommy, is everything okay at home?" Mrs. Davis asked gently. Tommy looked down at his shoes. He wanted to tell her about their problems, but his mother had taught him not to talk about family business with strangers. "We're fine," Tommy said quietly, but they weren't fine. Sarah was getting more and more desperate. She applied for food stamps and visited the food bank twice a week to get free groceries. She felt ashamed standing in line with other families who were struggling, but she had no choice. One evening, while Sarah was getting ready for her cleaning job, Tommy asked her a question that broke her heart. "Mommy, is it my fault that you lost your job at the hospital?" Sarah stopped what she was doing and knelt down in front of her son. "What do you mean, sweetie? If I hadn't been there that night, you wouldn't have gotten in trouble. If I had been quieter, or if I hadn't cried when that doctor found me, maybe you could still be a nurse." Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes. Her 7-year-old son was blaming himself for their problems. "Tommy, look at me. None of this is your fault, not one bit of it. I made the choice to bring you to work with me. You were perfect. You were brave and quiet and good. But now we have to live in this scary place, and you have to work cleaning toilets instead of helping sick people." Sarah hugged her son tightly. "We're going through a hard time right now, but it's not forever. And it's not your fault. Do you understand me?" Tommy nodded, but Sarah could see in his eyes that he still felt guilty. As winter turned colder, Sarah realized that her cleaning job wasn't enough. Even with food stamps and help from the food bank, they were barely surviving. She was 3 weeks behind on rent again, and Mrs. Chun, their new landlord, wasn't as understanding as Mrs. Patterson had been. Sarah started looking for a second job, something she could do during the day while Tommy was at school. She found work cleaning houses for wealthy families, making $10 an hour under the table. Now she was working almost 18 hours a day, sleeping only 3 or 4 hours between jobs. Tommy rarely saw his mother awake anymore. Sarah would leave for her cleaning jobs before he woke up for school, and she would come home after he was already asleep. They left notes for each other on the refrigerator, Tommy's drawings, and "I love you" messages, and Sarah's reminders about homework and what to eat for breakfast one night. Sarah came home from work and found Tommy sitting at their small kitchen table, trying to do his math homework by the light of a single lamp. The electricity had been turned off because they couldn't pay the bill. "Mommy, I can't see the numbers." "Very well," Tommy said, squinting at his worksheet. Sarah looked around their dark, cold apartment and felt like she had hit rock bottom. Her son was trying to do homework in the dark because she couldn't even afford to keep the lights on. What kind of mother was she? "I'm sorry, baby," Sarah whispered, sitting down next to Tommy and helping him with his math by flashlight. That night, as Tommy slept next to her in their shared bed, they had sold his bed to pay for groceries. Sarah lay awake wondering if she had made the right choices. Maybe she should have let Child Services take Tommy that night at the hospital. Maybe he would be better off with a family who could take care of him properly. But every time she looked at her son's face, she knew she could never give him up. They were all each other had in the world, and somehow they would find a way to survive. 3 months had passed since Sarah lost her job at St. Mary's Hospital. It was a cold Tuesday morning in February when Sarah's phone rang while she was getting ready for her day shift cleaning houses. The number on the screen looked familiar, but she couldn't place it. "Hello?" Sarah answered, expecting it to be another bill collector. "Is this Sarah Martinez?" asked a kind voice on the other end. "Yes, this is Sarah. This is Dr. Robert Chun, the new CEO of St. Mary's Hospital. I was wondering if you could come in for a meeting with me today. I'd like to discuss something important with you." Sarah's heart stopped. Why would the new CEO want to meet with her? Was she in more trouble? Had they decided to press charges against her for what she had done? I don't understand," Sarah said nervously. "What kind of meeting?" "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would 2 p.m. today work for you?" Sarah looked at her schedule. She was supposed to clean Mrs. Wilson's house this afternoon, but she couldn't say no to the CEO of the hospital where she used to work. "Yes, I can be there at 2 p.m. All morning, Sarah worried about the meeting. She told Tommy about it when she picked him up from school for lunch. "Are you going back to the hospital, Mommy?" Tommy asked, eating his peanut butter sandwich. "I don't know, sweetie. The new boss wants to talk to me." "I'm not sure what it's about." Tommy's eyes lit up with hope. "Maybe he wants to give you your job back." Sarah didn't want to get Tommy's hopes up, but she had to admit she was wondering the same thing. "We'll see, baby. Don't get too excited, okay?" At 1:45 p.m., Sarah walked into St. Mary's Hospital for the first time since that terrible night in November. She was wearing her best dress, the one she had worn to job interviews, and she had spent extra time on her hair and makeup. But she still felt nervous and out of place. The receptionist at the administrative office smiled at her. "You must be Sarah Martinez. Dr. Chun is waiting for you." Dr. Chun's office was big and comfortable, with family pictures on his desk and medical books lining the walls. Dr. Chun himself was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. He stood up when Sarah entered and shook her hand. "Thank you for coming, Sarah. Please have a seat." Sarah sat down in the chair across from his desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I'm sure you're wondering why I asked you here," Dr. Chun began. "I've been reviewing personnel files since I started as CEO last month, and your case caught my attention." Sarah's face turned red. "Dr. Chun, I want to apologize again for what I did. I know it was wrong, and I know I put people at risk. I was just desperate, and I didn't know what else to do." Dr. Chun held up his hand. "Sarah, before you say anything else, I want to tell you something about myself. 10 years ago, my wife died in a car accident, and I was left to raise my 8-year-old daughter alone. I was working as a doctor at the time, and I had to work long hours to support us." Sarah looked up, surprised by his personal story. "I remember nights when my babysitter would cancel at the last minute, and I had to make impossible choices. Do I leave my daughter alone? Do I miss work and risk my job? Do I take her with me and hope no one notices? I understand the position. You were in better than you might think. Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Someone finally understood. I've spent the last week talking to people who worked with you, Dr. Chun continued. I spoke with Maria, Janet, Ms. Rodriguez, and several others. Do you know what every single person told me? Sarah shook her head. They told me that you were one of the best nurses they've ever worked with. They said you were kind, professional, reliable, and that patients loved you. They said that in 8 years you never had a single complaint or disciplinary action. Until that night in November. But I broke the rules, Sarah said quietly. Yes, you did, and that was wrong. But I also understand why you did it. Dr. Chun leaned forward in his chair. Sarah, I want to offer you your job back. Sarah's mouth fell open. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. What? I want to offer you your job back with full benefits and your previous salary, but I also want to ask you to help me with something. Sarah was speechless. After 3 months of struggling, after being rejected by every hospital in the city, Dr. Chun was offering her a second chance. What would you need me to help you with? Sarah asked. I've been thinking about what happened to you, and I realize that St. Mary's Hospital has never really addressed the challenges that our employees face with childcare, especially those who work night shifts. I want to start a pilot program to provide on-site childcare for hospital employees during overnight hours. Sarah's eyes widened. You mean? I want to create a safe, supervised place where employees' children can stay during night shifts. I want you to help me design and run this program. Sarah felt like she was dreaming. Not only was Dr. Chun giving her job back, but he was turning her biggest mistake into an opportunity to help other families. I don't understand, Sarah said. Why would you do this for me? Dr. Chun smiled. Because I believe in second chances. Because I think you made a mistake, but you're not a bad person or a bad nurse. And because I think your experience can help us create something that will benefit many families. Just then, there was a soft knock on the office door. Dr. Chun's secretary peeked in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Sarah's son is here. He said he was looking for his mother. Sarah's heart jumped. Tommy? How did he get here? Tommy appeared in the doorway, looking small and worried. Mommy, you weren't home when I got back from school, and Mrs. Garcia said you came to the hospital. I was scared something happened to you. Dr. Chun looked at Tommy with interest. You must be the famous Tommy I've heard so much about. Tommy looked at the man in the suit nervously and moved closer to his mother. It's okay, sweetie, Sarah said, putting her arm around Tommy. This is Dr. Chun. He's the boss of the hospital. Dr. Chun knelt down to Tommy's level. Tommy, I want to ask you something. Would you like your mom to come back to work here as a nurse? Tommy's face lit up. Yes, she loves being a nurse. She's really good at helping sick people feel better. I think so too, Dr. Chun said. And I have an idea that might help other kids whose parents work here at night. Would you like to help us figure out how to make it work? Tommy looked at his mother, then back at Dr. Chun. You mean I could help? Well, you're an expert at being quiet and brave in a hospital at night. I think we could use your advice. Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. For the first time in months, she felt hope. Dr. Chun. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Chun said with a smile. You'll have a lot of work to do. But I have a feeling you're up for the challenge. As they walked out of the hospital together, Tommy took his mother's hand. Mommy, does this mean we can move back to our old apartment? Sarah squeezed her son's hand. We're going to be okay. Baby, we're finally going to be okay. For the first time in months, Sarah Martinez felt like she could breathe again. Their nightmare was over, and their new beginning was just starting. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the bright, cheerfully decorated room on the second floor of St. Mary's Hospital, watching Tommy color pictures with 3 other children whose parents worked the night shift. The room had comfortable beds, toys, books, and even a small kitchen area with healthy snacks. Most importantly, it had Mrs. Angela Foster, a licensed child care provider who watched over the children with patience and kindness. How are things going tonight, Mrs. Foster? Sarah asked, checking on the new overnight childcare program. Wonderful as always, Mrs. Foster replied with a smile. Tommy is helping little Emma with her reading homework. He's such a good big brother to all the younger children. Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she watched her son patiently helping a 5-year-old sound out words in a picture book. Tommy had grown so much over the past year. He was more confident, happier, and seemed to understand that their struggles had led to something beautiful. The St. Mary's Family Care Program, as it was officially called, had become a huge success. Word had spread to other hospitals around the city, and several had started similar programs. Sarah had been promoted to Director of Employee Family Services, a position that had been created especially for her. "Mommy, look!" Tommy called out, softly, showing her a drawing he had made. It was a picture of the hospital with stick figures representing all the families who used the childcare program. I drew all the kids who get to stay here while their moms and dads help sick people. It's beautiful, sweetie, Sarah said, kissing the top of his head. Sarah's life had completely changed since that February day when Dr. Chun offered her a second chance. She and Tommy had moved into a nice apartment in a safe neighborhood. Tommy was back at his old school where his grades had improved dramatically. They had health insurance, a steady income, and for the first time in over a year, Sarah wasn't worried about paying bills. But the best part wasn't the money or the security. The best part was that Sarah was doing work that mattered. She spent her days helping other single parents, families in crisis, and employees who were struggling to balance work and family responsibilities. She had become an advocate for working parents throughout the hospital system. Sarah, do you have a minute? Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway of the childcare room. Of course, Sarah said, following him into the hallway. I wanted to let you know that Channel 7 News wants to do a story about our family care program. They heard about what we're doing here and want to feature it on their evening show. They specifically asked to interview you and Tommy. Sarah felt nervous about being on television, but she also knew how important it was to share their story. If it helps other families, then yes, we'll do it. Double quotes, Dr. Chun smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. The interview is scheduled for next Tuesday. The following Tuesday, Sarah and Tommy sat in the hospital's conference room with a news reporter and a camera crew. Sarah was wearing her best dress, and Tommy was in his nicest shirt and tie. So, Sarah, the reporter began, can you tell us how this program started? Sarah took a deep breath. It started with a mistake I made. I was a single mother struggling to find childcare for my night shifts. I made a bad decision and brought my 7-year-old son to work with me, hiding him in an unused room. I was caught and fired. Tommy squeezed his mother's hand, encouraging her to continue. I thought my life was over. I couldn't find another nursing job, and my son and I ended up homeless and struggling to survive. But then Dr. Chun became our new CEO, and instead of judging me for my mistake, he saw an opportunity to help other families facing the same challenges. The reporter turned to Tommy. Tommy, what was it like when your mom brought you to work? Tommy thought carefully before answering. I was scared sometimes, but I wanted to help my mom. She works really hard to take care of sick people. I think all the kids whose parents work here at night should have a safe place to stay. And now you have that safe place, the reporter said. Double quotes. Yes, Tommy said with a big smile. And I get to help the little kids feel brave like my mom taught me to be. After the news story aired, Sarah received calls and emails from hospitals, single parents and working families from all over the country. Many wanted to start similar programs in their own hospitals. Sarah began traveling to other cities to help them set up family support programs. 1 year after the program started, St. Mary's Hospital held a celebration dinner. The families who used the childcare program, hospital staff, and community leaders all gathered in the hospital cafeteria, which had been decorated with balloons and banners. Dr. Chun stood up to give a speech. When I first heard about Sarah's situation, I saw a woman who had made a desperate choice because she was trying to take care of her family. But Sarah saw something bigger. She saw an opportunity to make sure no other parent would have to face the same impossible choice. The audience applauded, and Sarah felt her cheeks turn red. Today, our family care program serves 15 families. We have prevented 6 employees from having to quit their jobs due to childcare issues. And most importantly, we have created a community of support for working parents at St. Mary's Hospital. Dr. Chun looked directly at Sarah and Tommy, who were sitting at a table near the front. "Sarah, would you like to say something?" Sarah stood up, feeling nervous but proud. "A year ago, my son and I were sleeping in a storage room because I was desperate and out of options. Today, we have helped create a program that serves other families who might face the same challenges. Sometimes our biggest mistakes can lead to our most important accomplishments." She paused and looked at Tommy, who was beaming with pride. "I want to thank Dr. Chun for seeing potential instead of just problems. I want to thank the hospital staff who supported this program. And I want to thank my son Tommy, who taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what you have to do, even when you are scared." The audience gave Sarah a standing ovation. Tommy stood up and hugged his mother tightly. Later that evening, as Sarah was tucking Tommy into his own bed in their comfortable apartment, he asked her a question. "Mommy, do you think everything that happened to us was worth it?" Sarah thought about everything they had been through, the fear, the desperation, the homelessness, the struggle. Then she thought about the families they were helping, the secure life they now had, and the important work she was doing. "You know what, Tommy? I think everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen. We went through some very hard times, but those hard times led us to where we are now. So our secret adventure in the hospital was a good thing?" Sarah smiled. "Our secret adventure taught us that we could survive anything as long as we had each other. And now we're using what we learned to help other families." Tommy smiled and closed his eyes. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. Sweet dreams." As Sarah turned off the light and left Tommy's room, she thought about how much their lives had changed. She was no longer just Sarah Martinez, the struggling single mother who made a desperate choice. She was Sarah Martinez, the woman who turned her biggest mistake into her greatest accomplishment. And every night, as she watched other families benefit from the program she had helped create, Sarah knew that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best things in our lives. She had learned that second chances are precious gifts, and that one person's compassion can change everything. Tommy's dream of becoming a doctor was still years away, but Sarah knew that whatever he chose to do with his life, he would always remember the lesson they learned together, that even in our darkest moments, hope and help can come from the most unexpected places.